Muy buenos días o muy buenas tardes,
Good
dependiendo de dónde se
morning, good
encuentren
afternoon,
ustedes.
wherever you
Mi
are.
nombre es Carol
My name
Guerrero,
is Carol
soy
Guerrero.
moderadora de noticias de Deutsche
I'm
Welle en
going to
español,
be
también corresponsal
the
en Alemania de
moderator
W Radio,
and also a
y les doy la
correspondent
bienvenida a esta
German
doceava edición del
paper.
Foro
And
Económico
I would like
Internacional
to welcome
sobre
you to
América
this 12th
Latina y el
edition
Caribe.
International
Este foro es
Economic Forum
coorganizado por el
on
Centro
Latin
de
American
Desarrollo de la Organización para la
Caribbean. It's
Cooperación
organized
y el
by the
Desarrollo
Center for
Económicos,
Development
OCDE,
for the
el Banco
organization
Interamericano
and the
de Desarrollo, BID,
OECD
y la
and
Agencia
the
Francesa de
Inter-American Development
Desarrollo,
Bank
AFD.
and
Esta
also the
doceava edición
French
se realiza en el marco
Agency for
del
Development.
60 aniversario de la
And
firma del
this is
convenio
held
por el
in
que
the
se creó
framework
la
of the
OCDE.
60th
La
anniversary
temática de este
of
año es
the creation of the
repensar
OECD.
el
This year,
contrato
we will be
social en
talking
tiempos
about
de
rethinking the social
COVID-19,
contract in times of
decisión
COVID-19,
fundamental para generar una
which is
recuperación
a very
sostenible
important
e
addition
inclusiva de la
to
región.
make sure that we can
Antes de dar
ensure
paso a
a
nuestros invitados y a nuestros
sustainable
panelistas
recovery.
de muy
Before
alto nivel que estarán
introducing the
presentes
different
en esta
panel
sesión
members
inaugural,
at a very high
quisiera
level who will
recordar
be in
que
this
gran
opening
parte de
session,
este evento
I would
será
like to
realizado en español, pero también
remind
algunas
you that a
intervenciones
large part of
se
this
darán
event
en
will be held
inglés
in
o en
Spanish and
francés,
there will be
de manera
some
que quienes lo deseen
speakers
necesiten
speaking
una
French and
traducción
English.
simultánea,
So for
pues
those of you
tienen
who
esa
need
opción en los
interpretation, you have
idiomas.
the
Y
possibility
pues ya sin más
of
preámbulo,
having
comenzamos la sesión
interpretation in three
presidencial de
languages.
alto nivel
And
con su
since we're starting
excelencia
the
el señor
presidential
presidente Carlos
high-level
Alvarado y
dialogue,
Quesada
we
de
will
la
begin
República de
with
Costa
His
Rica,
Excellency
seguido
Carlos
de Ángel
Alvarado
Gurría, secretario general de la
Quesada,
OCDE.
President of the
También estará con
Republic
nosotros el señor
of
Mauricio
Costa
Claver
Rica,
Carone,
and
presidente del BID,
followed by
y el
Ángel
señor
Gurría,
Vladimir
Secretary General of the
Carone,
Organization of
exdirector
Economic
general de la
Cooperation and
AFD.
Development, and we will also have
Mayormente Carlos
Mauricio
Alvarado
Claver
Quesada,
Coron,
tiene usted la palabra.
President of the Inter-American Bank, and Remy Rioux from the
Muchísimas
French
gracias
Agency.
y muchísimas
You have the
gracias
floor, President.
a don Ángel
Thank you very
Gurría,
much.
secretario general de la
And thank
OCDE,
you very much
a
to
don
Ángel
Mauricio
Gurría, who is the
Carone, presidente del
Secretary
BID,
General
y
of
a
the
Remy
OECD,
Rioux,
and
director
Mauricio
general de la Agencia
Claver
Francesa
Carone,
de
President of the
Desarrollo.
Inter-American
Es para mí
Development
un
Bank, and
placer
Remy
poder
Rioux, the Chief
dirigirme y
Executive Officer
compartir
of the
algunas
French
reflexiones en
Development
este foro.
Agency. It's an honor for
Yo,
me to take part
francamente,
in
la
this
mejor
forum and share
reflexión que
with
creo
you
que
some
hoy podemos
reflections.
compartir
I
cada
think that
quien
the
tiene que ser una reflexión de la mano con la
reflection, the
acción,
best reflection we can share,
porque estos
is
ya casi
on
10
how we
meses
can
de
act. In
pandemia
the
nos
past
han
10
dado una
months,
claridad no
almost, of
solo
the
del efecto
pandemic,
propio de la
we
pandemia,
have understood
sino
not
que
only
han
the effect of
servido
the
como una
pandemic per se,
radiografía
but
del
this has
estatus de América Latina y
revealed,
que sin duda
like an
alguna
X-ray of the state
sostengo
of
es la
Latin
región
America,
más afectada
which has
por
been
el
no doubt
COVID-19,
the
no solo
most
por la
affected
afectación en
region
materia de
of
contagios y
COVID-19, not
fallecimientos
only because of
internacionalmente,
the
sino
contagion
porque
and the death
ha
toll,
desnudado
but it's
las
also
desigualdades que tenemos como
shown
región,
with great clarity the
la
inequalities in
precarización
our
en alguna
region,
parte de la
the
sostenibilidad o la existencia de
precariousness
nuestras economías y
of our
también la
economies,
desigualdad
and
interna
also
en nuestros países. Son
inequalities
retos
within
que
our
ya estaban
countries.
ahí
And
y que
these
esta
were
situación
facts
de
that
COVID
already
ha
exist, but the
hecho esta
COVID
fragilidad
situation
más evidente
has
para todos
shown this
nosotros.
vulnerability even
Entonces
better.
hay que actuar, tenemos que actuar como
So
se ha
now we
venido
have to
haciendo
act
con la parte de
as we
vacunas,
have done
tenemos que actuar
with
con la parte de
vaccines
incrementar la fortaleza de la
and
protección
with
social de nuestros sistemas de
strengthening
salud,
social
de
protection
insumos
and
de
our
gasto
health
eficiente
systems, but
para
this won't be
afrontar
enough
lo que venga
to be able
inmediatamente
to
después.
face what
Muchas de
is
las
going to
economías
come immediately
emergentes en
after.
cuenta
Many
en
of the
América Latina
emerging
van a tener un
economies in
impacto duro
Latin
en
America
relación
are going to
con
be very hard
sus
hit
situaciones
with
económicas. Por
regard
un
to
lado,
their
los impactos de crecimiento
economies,
económico,
be,
impactos en el
be their
desempleo,
impacts on
impactos
economic
en la
growth,
situación
on
fiscal
unemployment,
y el margen
on
fiscal que tienen
the
los
fiscal
países de América Latina
space
y
that
el Caribe.
the
También
Latin
siempre he
American
dicho, una de
and
las
Caribbean
principales
countries have.
industrias
Tourism
de
is one of the
toda la región,
main
la
industries
recuperación
of
verse
the area,
afectada,
and
va a depender
the
mucho de cómo el
recovery
turismo
is
internacional
going
evolucione
to
y de eso va a
depend on
depender
how
mucho
international tourism
nuestra
evolves
evolución
and
como
develops.
región.
And this will have a
Hay
heavy
que hacer,
impact
entonces,
on the
vemos
development of our own region.
cuando he visto en Europa o en los Estados Unidos
When
o
I
en
saw in
Asia,
Europe
particularmente
and
en
the
China,
US
la
and
capacidad
Asia,
de estas naciones
specifically
desarrolladas
in China, the
de
capacity of these
incrementar su gasto
developed countries
como
to
una forma de
increase
galvanizar el
their
empleo, de proteger, de hacer protección social,
expenditure and invest in social protection. We feel that the developing country and the emerging countries can do so, but it's very hard for us. And as often said President Duque in Colombia, a great friend of mine, there are economic agents that don't take this into consideration when measuring the situation in our countries because of their state. We have the fiscal state situation, the economic growth situation, the unemployment, and the inequalities, because this pandemic is affecting the people with lower income most. These people who are in the informal sector that have no savings and have to go to work, whatever the situation, whether there's a pandemic or not, because they have to feed their family. And they're the hardest hit by unemployment, as the statistics have shown for all the regions. And an additional concern is that in the past few years, and this is also true in Costa Rica, we have seen that the social political, economic, and stability can be at risk if we do not find solutions. There can be a lot of social unrest with a lot of expressions of discontent. And it's very important to work on inclusion of our society and make sure that there is a dialogue to dispel this pressure. So, how should we act? There are a number of very important major issues. Education. We need to ensure an education of quality for all, because this is the main mechanism that will ensure social mobility in our society. It has to be inclusive, it has to be good quality and education for everybody and for life, and to meet the challenges of the fourth industrial revolution, which means that it's an education not to have a fixed position, but for an individual who can be creative, who can act as a leader, who can work in teams and can problem solve, but can also have empathy and especially because of the differences, that it has to be somebody who accepts diversity. For that, for a good education, we need universal connectivity, because one of the problems that was most striking in this period, that those who were able to study during this pandemic and were able to improve their capacity were connected with society, whereas others weren't. And nowadays, more than the income inequalities, one of the major inequalities are those of education and connectivity. We have a digital literacy project that we have set up to connect all schools in all the country and make sure that the children who go to school are also connected at home. But as long as Latin America doesn't ensure this universal connectivity, there'll always be those who are connected and those who aren't and are left out. And that is why an institution like the Inter-American Development Bank knows very well. So it's going to be a more interconnected region and more competitive. And we have just heard that the assembly of microprocessors will reopen in Costa Rica for a major company. And even in times of pandemic, the industry that was linked to FDIs in Costa Rica was the fastest growing one during the pandemic. But every time that there's a young person or a woman who is well trained and another one who isn't, there will be inequality. Costa Rica has also understood that we have to make sure that bilingualism is extremely important. And therefore, we want to make sure that by 2040, all the children who will finish school will be bilingual. And science has shown also that people have to have more empathy, and thanks to that, they will be much more open. We have to fight for gender equality, and we have to continue fighting it because we're still in a region where a lot of women uh, are victims of sexual violence and gender violence, and some of them even die in the region. We have to combat this. We have to empower them on a political and economic level in countries such as Costa Rica. The women are the ones who have to take initiative and enter the labor market. They have to work as well, and not only women. It has to be a question of principle and also of competitiveness. We have to win the battle of gender. This is a central issue for our region. It's a cultural change that is pending, as well as the inequalities in general. And the gender inequality is one of the major inequalities in Costa Rica. In Costa Rica, most of the poor families are families where the breadwinner is woman. In this environment, I would also like to add two challenges which are major as well. The fiscal space of the countries in the region. And among the actions that we have to take, the initiative of the Secretary General of the UN, leader also led also by Jamaica and Canada, which is a fund with soft loans to help countries, emerging countries. If there isn't a vaccine for everybody, we won't be able to get rid of this pandemic. And if we don't, if the recovery isn't general, we won't overcome the vulnerability. And if our economies don't recover at the same pace as the developed economies, the recovery won't be a total one. So as long as we are not fully fledged partners, everything will be affected. Tourism, trade, but also if our region doesn't have a proper protection, we can see an aggravation of migration, drug trafficking, because there are a lot of people who devote themselves to this industry that we don't want, or other activities. And if we find a way to fund the developing country properly, it won't be only ethically desirable, but it will be economically desirable as well. And there has to be international solidarity for that. So all of this will be done knowing that there's a problem that already exists and will be the problem of the following decades, which is the climate change crisis and the climate change. And we want to give the example and act with actions. And since February 2019, we launched on our decarbonation plan to reach a totally carbon-free economy by 2050. And we have launched on an electric loading station program for there to be loading stations all over the country for cars. And we want to make sure that electricity is 99% clean. Everything that's produced by electric energy has a clean carbon um,
inversionista que produzca en el
footprint.
país con energía
Anybody who
lo
invests
hace
in
de
the
una forma
country and needs
sostenible
electric,
y amigable
and needs electricity
con el
is
medio ambiente.
investing in a very
También
sustainable way.
lideramos junto a Francia la coalición de alta ambición por el
We
ambiente.
also lead with France the coalition for the environment in order to protect 30% of our lands and lands in every country to safeguard those territories to protect biodiversity, as the loss of ecosystems and biodiversity is a huge risk for humanity. And we also want to protect 30% of oceans. So we have a green and blue agenda. 50% of 30% of our territory in Costa Rica is already protected, and we want to move on from 2% of ocean territory protected up to 30%, and to do so in a sustainable manner. We need to safeguard spawning areas and reproduction areas for many species which may migrate to other areas. That way we could ensure sustainable fishing, among other things. Sustainability is a big challenge for our generation and is our duty for the next generation as well. And Latin America must work on this for two reasons. First, because we are emitters. We may not be major emitters, but we are one of the most vulnerable regions because of climate change. Latin America is one of the most vulnerable regions, and we could see that with hurricanes that struck particularly Honduras, Guatemala, and Nicaragua. The impacts were felt from Colombia to Mexico. Two hurricanes which got worse and because of climate change. And that's only to speak about the current season, the current hurricane season. What's going to happen next year? All these hurricanes and storms destroyed crops, infrastructures. There are extreme weather events which negatively impact agriculture, either because of flooding or drought. And that results in more migration and more poverty. Our region has to lead by example. We have to call upon everyone to reduce emissions and to reach the Paris Agreement targets. And we need to urge other countries and show them that climate change is costing lives in our region and livelihoods in our region. That's why this is a critical issue for Latin America and for Costa Rica. We need to pay attention to the climate crisis, which is a major problem which is going to stay here for generations. And given the current pandemic, inequality, and employment crisis, there's something we have to deal with. There are no black or white issues in our world. There are always nuances, complex issues. That's why tools developed by the OECD or meetings such as today's forum or spaces to discuss sustainable development are crucial. Work with data as well. I focused on action. For each problem, we need coordinated action to bring about changes. Politics needs to bring about changes for the benefit of people. Furthermore, we need a human approach.
Si hablo de acción es porque creo en la libertad.
I want action because I believe in freedom. To act and to be free is just the same. Our region today needs to take decisions, needs to do something, but needs to do things with human value, with empathy, with love for oneself and love for others, as there are many people who are going through hardship. There are no easy solutions, there are no magic wands, particularly in our region, but we do have opportunities. Our region has to draw on empathy and solidarity to change things, and we have to take risks to fight against the status quo, because there are people who are well off in a region, but many other are not. So we need to distribute benefits. We mustn't fear changes. We have to overcome ideological constraints. We have to be more pragmatic And we need to bring about changes in our circumstances to offer our youth, our children, a new reality, a wonderful reality to enjoy the extraordinary region of Latin America and the Caribbean. Action, empathy, that's the key issue. And that's what will enable to change things for the better for us and for future generations. I'll be happy to listen to the other guests, and of course, I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, President Alvarado, President of the Republic of Costa Rica, for your words. We give the floor to Ángel Gurría, Secretary General of the OECD. Thank you, Carol. Mr. President, President Alvarado, Ambassador Manuel Tovar, Ambassador of Costa Rica before the OECD, Mr. Mauricio Claver Carone, President of the IDB, and Remy Riu, who is going to practice Spanish now to brush it off. I welcome you to this 12th International Economic Forum on Latin America and the Caribbean. This year, we focus on rethinking the social contract in times of COVID. I'd like to express my appreciation to President Alvarado for taking part in this forum. And I want to thank him for his attendance as well yesterday during the celebration of our 60th anniversary. Your words, President Alvarado, are very significant, and they were very significant yesterday as well, to represent the perspective of developing countries, particularly in Latin America and the Caribbean. The current edition of the forum is held against the framework of the 60th anniversary of the OECD, which we celebrated yesterday, but we have plenty of activities all throughout the week. The OECD is proud to have 3 Latin American countries as members, Mexico, Chile, and Colombia. And very soon, we'll have 4 members from Latin America, as Costa Rica will join us as well. The president explained to us that there's just some paperwork at the Constitutional Court in order to advance the ratification process. So by the end of January or in early February, Costa Rica will likely become the 4th Latin American country as a member of the OECD. We have several Latin American countries which are members of the Development Center. We have Mario Bezzini with us today, the head of the Development Center at the OECD. 3 Latin American countries, in addition, all of them member of Development Center, Argentina, Brazil, and Peru, are among the 6 countries which have applied for membership, full membership in our organization, to be OECD members and not just members of the Development Center. Thank you to the co-organizers, the IDB, the Inter-American Development Bank, which make significant contributions for the region and for us as well. And also, thank you to the French Development Agency for their support in organizing this forum. Latin America and the Caribbean, as President Alvarado has said, are facing a social and economic crisis which is unprecedented. It is the emerging and developing region which has been hit the hardest by COVID-19. The COVID-19 crisis has had an asymmetric impact, an unequal impact, and it is the most vulnerable groups which have the worst part. The pandemic has hit the region when the region was already facing big challenges, the so-called structural development traps linked to persistent gaps, socio-economic gaps, the low growth potential, increasing social discontent in many countries across the region. The COVID-19 crisis has laid bare it is urgent to create a new development model in the region, a more inclusive economic model, a more sustainable model based on a new social contract. As shown in our Latin American Economic Outlook 2020, known as you know as LEO, developed by the OECD and ECLAC and the European Commission and the CAF. So as shown in the report, the current context offers a window of opportunity to undertake political processes which are necessary to build a new social contract. Allow me to mention 4 key pillars around which the new social contract could revolve. First, citizen engagement. Forging a new social contract requires strong consensus among states, citizens, and non-state actors in order to define a comprehensive, coherent, and coordinated development strategy. We need to ensure that all voices are heard, and not only heard, but taken into account. Second, welfare. Welfare systems in the region have proved to be insufficient. Around 40% of workers in the region are not protected by any welfare system. This is largely due to the high level of informality in employment or in the economy, which affects almost 60% of the labor force. While several countries in the region have expanded their social protection systems through temporary measures and sometimes through more permanent measures, regardless, a new social contract should promote innovative policies to reduce gaps in welfare coverage, to protect the most vulnerable population, and to reduce inequalities. Because Latin America is not the poorest region in the world, but is the most unequal region in the world.
Construir economías más productivas, más resilientes. Y durante las últimas décadas, la región no ha podido
few months, we weren't able to continue and converge towards the income level of most advanced economies. In 2019, the labor productivity on the average in the LAC region was only 40% of the OECD average. And that is why we need a better and greater cooperation between government, private sector, and civil society. Adopting measures that can stimulate productive transformation and strengthen regional integration, participation in value chain, and of course, attracting investments. Fourth, a new fiscal pact. The COVID-19 crisis found most countries in the region with a reduced fiscal space, which is what President Alvarado was saying, which means that many of the OECD countries and the most advanced countries had fiscal space to be able to face the pandemic. because they
No es
had
el caso
enough
de muchos de los
funds,
países
which
en
was not
desarrollo,
the
de
case
los países
in many
emergentes
of the
y de
developing
los
and
países de
emerging
América
countries
Latina.
and in Latin
Es
America
fundamental
in particular.
avanzar entonces hacia
It
un
is
pacto
important and
fiscal
essential
que sea progresivo,
to move forward
que sea
a
justo, que
progressive
sea
fiscal
sostenible,
pact that
así como hacia
is
una
fair,
mayor
sustainable,
eficiencia del
and
gasto público,
progressive, and
luchando
also
contra
with
la
a
evasión
better,
fiscal,
effective,
con la expansión
more
de la
effective
base tributaria.
expenditure strategy,
Esto, por supuesto, cuando el ciclo
and
económico
with
lo
the
permite.
fighting the tax evasion
Además, la gestión
or
de la
the
deuda
expansion
pública
of the tax base when the
es un
economic
elemento
crisis permits.
central que
In
requiere
addition,
una
public
acción
debt management
coordinada
becomes a
a
central
nivel
element that requires
internacional.
coordinated action
Otra de las
at the
iniciativas del
international
presidente
level.
Alvarado, el FASE,
Another of the
FACE,
initiatives of President Alvarado Facil
vamos a quedar todos los países prácticamente sin
goes in
excepción
this direction.
con una
Practically all the
deuda
countries,
pública más
without
pesada,
no
una
exception,
mayor deuda
will
pública
be left
como
with a
proporción del
much
PIB. Y
greater
sobre todo recuerden que
debt
el PIB se nos está
in
achicando también.
relation to the
Entonces
GDP,
está
which is
aumentando la
also
deuda y
decreasing. So
achicándose el PIB.
the debt is increasing
Así
and
es
the
que
GDP
vamos a
is
tener que
reducing.
enfocarnos
So we
en
will
esto,
really have to focus
pues al terminar
on
el impacto de la
this
pandemia.
when the
Asimismo,
pandemic
la
impact
crisis nos recuerda
is
que vivimos en un mundo
overcome.
interconectado, un mundo en que
And we
solo
know
las
that we also
respuestas
live in an
coordinadas
interconnected
pueden ser
world
efectivas.
where only coordinated
Por
responses
eso,
can be
ahora más que
effective.
nunca,
That
es
is
el
why
momento de
now, more
reivindicar
than
el multilateralismo.
it is time to
El multilateralismo como un
claim
valor
multilateralism
fundamental
as a
para el mundo
fundamental value
post-pandemia.
for the post-pandemic world.
¿Cómo podemos abordar el tema del comercio si no
How
es
can we approach the issue of trade
¿Cómo
if we
podemos
don't do it on
abordar
a
el
multilateral
tema de la
basis
inversión?
or
¿Cómo podemos
investment
abordar el tema
or
del cambio climático
climate
o de la
change
defensa de la biodiversidad
or
o de los océanos?
the defense of
¿Cómo podemos abordar
biological diversity
la
or
migración?
the oceans? How can we
¿Cómo podemos
tackle migration?
abordar
How
y
can we
enfrentar el
face
más grande pan con lo de,
the
quiere decir, en todo el mundo, ni siquiera la isla
greatest
más lejana se escapa
time,
de la pandemia del
this
COVID-19
greatest
si no
pandemic?
es
Nobody
por
is
la vía
escaping it,
multilateral.
and we have to work on a
Queridos
multilateral
amigos
basis
y
to fight
amigas,
it.
señor
Dear friends,
señor presidente del BID,
President,
de la Agencia
President
Francesa
of
del
the
Desarrollo, decía Pablo
IDB
Neruda que,
and
y
of
lo
the
cito,
French
hay heridas
Agency of Development.
que en
Pablo
vez de
Neruda said,
abrirnos
and
la
I'm quoting
piel,
him, there are
nos abren los ojos. Pues,
injuries
el
that instead of
COVID-19 ha hecho
opening
estragos en
our
nuestra región, pero también nos ha abierto
skin,
los ojos,
open our eyes. And
nos ha
this is
mostrado
exactly what the
que
pandemic did.
somos muy
It's opened
vulnerables,
our
que ya
eyes,
no
although
podemos
it's
seguir
affected us and hurt us.
posponiendo las reformas
We've seen that we're
estructurales
very
que
vulnerable. We can't
necesitamos
continue
para
postponing the
construir una América
structural
Latina
reforms that are
más
necessary
resiliente, más
to
incluyente,
build a more resilient
más
and a more
sostenible.
inclusive Latin America and a more sustainable
La
one.
OCDE y
OECD
su centro de desarrollo
and its development center
están comprometidos
are
a
committed
ayudar a los gobiernos de la
to
región
help the governments
a
of the
repensar
region
el contrato social
to
y
rethink
avanzar
the social
hacia un
contract
nuevo modelo de desarrollo
and to move
que
towards a
permita una
new
recuperación
development model
sostenible
that
e
allows
incluyente.
a sustainable
Y me da gusto
and
anunciarles
inclusive
que la edición
recovery.
del
And I'm very
2021
pleased
de las
to announce
perspectivas
that
económicas
the
de América Latina,
2021
del
edition of
2021,
the Latin
estará
American
dedicado
Economic Outlook
enteramente a
will be
esta temática.
totally devoted to that
Cuenten
theme.
con la OCDE.
You can count
Estamos
on the
listos
OECD.
para seguir trabajando
We're ready
no solo
to continue working with
la
you,
América Latina y el Caribe, sino
not
para
only with Latin
la América
Americans
Latina
and
y el
Caribbean, but
Caribe.
also for Latin
Muchas
America
gracias.
and the Caribbean. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, secretario general de
Thank
la
you very
OCDE,
much,
señor
Secretary
Ángel
General
Gurría, por su
of the
intervención.
OECD, Mr.
Tiene
Ángel
ahora
Gurría.
la palabra el señor
And now we
Mauricio
give the
Claver
floor
Carone,
to Mr.
presidente
Mauricio
de
Claver Carone, President of the IDB.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank
Es
you
un
very
placer
much.
participar por primera vez en
It's
este foro,
a pleasure to take
organizado
part
por el
for
BID
the
y
first
cuya
time in this
12ª
forum
edición
organized
celebramos
by
hoy.
the IDB.
Me gustaría agradecer
On
particularmente
its
al secretario general
12th
Gurría
edition, I
por
would
su
like to
liderazgo
thank
estos
in
años,
particular
de la OCDE,
Secretary
de
General
aseguro
Mr.
continuaremos
Gurria
su legado de promoción de
for
análisis y
his
soluciones
leadership of the
conjuntas
OECD. We will
para mejorar
continue
las vidas en
to
América Latina
analyze
y el
policies
Caribe.
together to improve
Recientemente
life in Latin
renovamos
America
el
and
MOU
Caribbean.
BID
We
OCDE
just renewed the
impulso
MOU with the
para
OECD,
fortalecer nuestra colaboración en
which
temas
will
claves para el
stimulate
crecimiento
and
económico,
give
la
us more
prosperidad,
momentum
la inclusión social,
to work
el
together
fortalecimiento
towards
institucional, el
social
crecimiento verde y la
inclusion,
inteligencia artificial.
strengthening
También quiero agradecer al
institutions,
BID
artificial
por su
intelligence.
liderazgo de
And
este foro y
I would
reconocer a
also
la
like
Agencia Francesa
to
de Desarrollo como
congratulate
gran
Mr.
aliado
Remy Liu
europeos
for
en América Latina
co-chairing
y el Caribe y el primer
this
foro
forum.
financiador europeo del BID en la
And
región. Juntos,
together,
en el 2020, hemos unido
in
esfuerzos para dar
2020,
respuesta
we
a
joined
la crisis
efforts
del
to
COVID-19,
respond to
promover la
COVID-19.
movilidad urbana y articular planes de
And
descarbonización
we've
en la región.
organized plans of
Tan solo en los
decarboning the
últimos 3
region.
años hemos
In
financiado
the past 2
conjuntamente
years, we
con
funded
países en
together
desarrollo $3.000 millones para
$3
proyectos de
billion
desarrollo sostenible en la región.
for sustainable
Gracias
development in the
al presidente
region.
de Costa
And
Rica,
thanks to
Carlos
the
Alvarado
President of
Quesada,
Costa Rica,
por compartir
Carlos
su visión
Alvarado
de
Quesada, for
respuesta
sharing his
del
vision
país al
and
COVID-19.
the response of his
Desde los
country to
primeros días de la
COVID.
pandemia,
Since
en
the
el
very
BID hemos
beginning of the
trabajado
pandemic,
codo a codo con cada uno de
we've
los
worked
16 países
together
miembros
with
regionales
all
para
of
lograr
the
una respuesta
regional
sin
member
precedentes.
countries to
Apoyamos
find an
la identificación y la
unprecedented
compra de
response.
equipo médico y
We
sanitario.
bought medical
Impulsamos el apoyo
equipment and
financiero y no
health
financiero a
sanitary.
esfuerzos públicos y
We
privados,
increased
trabajando con gobiernos incluyendo
support,
Francia,
financial
Japón,
support and
España,
non-financial with
Corea, Canadá,
Spain,
Estados
Japan,
Unidos, entre otros.
the United
También con
States, and other
empresas
countries.
novedosas
And
como
with the
Amazon,
new
Banco Santander,
enterprises,
Microsoft,
Amazon,
Google,
Banco
y
Santander,
con socios
and
multilaterales estratégicos.
with
Entre esos, los
multilateral
que celebramos
strategic
hoy con
partners,
tanto orgullo, la OCDE.
and the OECD being
Pues ya
the
casi un
one
año la pandemia
we
ha
are really
transformado
celebrating
nuestras
today.
vidas y economías y es
Pandemic
fácil
has
pensar que con una
changed
vacuna
our
podremos
economic
volver
life.
a la normalidad.
And it might be easy to
Pero
think
quiero
that
ser
the
claro,
vaccine will
en
allow us
América
to
Latina y
return
el
to
Caribe
normal.
nos
But
queda
in Latin America
mucho
and
más
Caribbean,
por resolver.
there will be
El
much
Fondo Monetario
more
estima que en
to do.
promedio el
The
PIB de América Latina y el Caribe se
IMF
contraerá en
considers that
8%
the
en el 2020
GDP will
y esta es
contract
una
by
recesión sin
8%,
precedentes en
and
la región
therefore
y
the
por
recession
ende
will be
en los últimos
unprecedented
60
in
años
the region and the worst
de este
crisis
banco.
in 60 years, the 60 years of existence of
Solo
this bank.
a lo mejor en las décadas perdidas de los años
These
80
may be
habían
the
pérdidas
lost decades of the 80s, only in the lost
Obviamente
decades
no
of the
queremos
80s
tener
that there
otra década
the
perdida
losses were
y
similar,
eso
but we do not want to have
Por otro
another
lado, desde
lost
BID estimamos
decade.
que en el 2020 se
In the
destruirán
IDB,
25
we
millones de
think
empleos
that there
y
will be
23 millones
25
de personas
million
pasarán
of
a la
jobs
pobreza.
lost,
Para
and
responder a estos retos,
30 million
no
people
bastarán
will
las estrategias del
find
pasado.
themselves in poverty. And to be able to
El
face
primer
these
reto que
challenges
tiene
that the
América Latina y el
past
Caribe es
policies
regresar
weren't
a la
enough.
senda del
The first thing
crecimiento
we have to do is
económico.
return to the
Sin
path of
embargo, la
growth.
región no puede simplemente
But
volver
the
a la
region
tasa de crecimiento
cannot
que se
do
observaba
it
antes de la crisis.
and cannot
En la
return to
década
the
previa,
growth
la región
rate
desarrolló
that it knew before the
2.4% por año en promedio.
the
El
region
crecimiento de la productividad
grew
también
about
fue muy
1.4%
bajo.
in the
De
region.
hecho, en lo que se refiere a la
But
productividad laboral,
as far as
América Latina y el Caribe
labor
lleva al menos
productivity in
3
the LAC
décadas
region, for
perdiendo terreno en
30
relación con los
years,
países del este
we
del
have
Sahara.
lost, we
Los motores del crecimiento
have been
económico son
distanced
varios
by the
y
other
quiero
regions
destacar
in the world.
4.
There
Primero,
are
la
4
región
major
debe
problems.
promover una mayor integración
The
comercial
region
y
must
aprovechar
promote
las
a
oportunidades de
better
nearshoring de las cuales se
commercial
asegura
integration,
el futuro
trade
accesible.
integration, and
Segundo, la región
seize
debe
the
asegurar la
opportunity.
estabilidad y
Second,
liquidez
it
del
has to
sistema
ensure
bancario.
stability and liquidity of the
Tercero,
banking system.
tenemos que
Third,
invertir en la infraestructura.
we have to
La región
invest
tiene un
in
enorme
infrastructure.
déficit en
We have a
infraestructura,
major
incluida
deficit
la
of
digital. Y
infrastructure,
la inversión en
including the
infraestructura
digital
genera
one.
empleo
Investing in
y
this
ayudará a
sector
una rápida
will generate
recuperación
employment
económica.
and will
Y
lead to
cuarto,
a rapid
es
recovery,
indispensable
economic
invertir en
recovery.
el
Fourth,
capital humano.
we have
El
to
cierre de
invest
escuelas,
in
el
human
posible aumento
capital.
de la deserción escolar,
The closing
las
of
pérdidas de
schools
aprendizaje conllevan
and
pérdidas
the
de
loss of
productividad
learning
que podrían tener
imply
consecuencias
losses
por
of
décadas sin
productivity
recuperarlo.
that could have consequences
En
over
paralelo a
decades.
la crisis económica, la región
So in
está
parallel
atravesando
to the
una profunda
economic
crisis social,
crisis,
que
we're
existía
experiencing
en
in
el
our region a
origen antes de la pandemia.
social crisis.
Las protestas
The protests that swept over the region in 2019 showed the enormous discontent of people and the major inequalities that persist. To close these gaps, major reforms are necessary in three areas. First of all, we have to make sure that all our children and young people access equality education. And the workers have to have the chance to continue to work and adjusting to changes in the labor demand. So, second, the social security systems have to be completely transformed. We know that obviously the contributions are linked to the formal workers who contribute, and obviously informality is slows productivity, and we have to protect the more vulnerable people in the remote areas where there are indigenous people. And to face this social crisis is going to be a major challenge. There are, it still is a challenge that we have to make sure that our citizens can lead a dignified life and be productive. Facing these challenges, IDB has to increase to $20 billion per year its funding, and we've already started negotiating this. The objective of IDB, of the IDB group, during the 5 years of my mandate will be one, to create formal jobs of good quality. We'll strengthen digitalization, and we will support SMEs. On the other hand, we will have to improve the leverage we have with other international institutions. The second day of my mandate, I met with the World Bank and the IMF to create a formal relationship. And we will have to use the national platforms, and we will have to mobilize better the private investment. We would like a partnership to include the Inter-American Bank of Economic Integration. And IDB is cooperating with international organizations. And we are working also with the UNDP to be able to work together on an operation initiatives on the pandemic that are funded by the IDB. We know that there were also pre-existing challenges, and the region will still suffer the disastrous effects of the climate changes, such as those the havoc wreaked by hurricanes in the region. We've invited also European partners to try and maximize our recovery and our support to recovery. And we're working with the European Union and the European Investment Bank and trying to align our efforts and use instruments that allow to minimize the risks of investment. We're more committed than ever to strengthen our partnership with Latin America and Caribbean, not to lose another decade, and to see the great opportunity and potential of this region. And we will do all we can to move in this direction. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Mauricio Caron, President of the IDB. And now I'm going to give the floor to Mr. Remy.
And now Mr. Remy Gignoux, who's the Director of the French Agency for Development. I will speak in French.
Agency. He will be speaking in French. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carol. Thank you.
And, good morning or good afternoon to all.
Hello to everyone. I'm sorry, but I can't speak in Spanish, which still needs improvement. First, I wanted to tell you that the AFD is extremely happy and honored to take part in the forum this year. It's the first time we do. The first time we organize it.
The first time we're co-organizing it.
And I found the previous intervention extremely interesting. Costa Rica is the last country in which the AFT started to work in Latin America. It was in 2019. We've already forged a very strong partnership, notably in support of the decarbonization plan for 2050. And also over the next few days, we are forging a partnership with the National Bank of Costa Rica, and the Development Bank with a green credit line to help the economy and to help the transition in the private sector. I'm also very happy to speak after Mauricio Claver-Caron. Our partnership with the BID has become very strong over the last few years. We're very happy about it. Lots of co-financing, lots of technical cooperation, exchange of knowledge on climate, biodiversity, gender equality, and even today on social issues. So I really wish him a very strong success during his mandate, and I hope we will continue this common work. And of course, I'd like to thank the OECD and wish them a very good anniversary, and congratulate them for yesterday. They organized a very good event. I actually took part in it with sending a small video, so I really congratulate Angel, who really did a sterling job at the OECD, and especially to create closer links with Latin America, a continent that he knows very well. And several states have actually joined the OECD, the region, and have strengthened the OECD and also give a stronger, more importance of Latin American questions in world governments. And the Leo is a very important date today in the year to understand better how the world changes. And actually next year, the event, we will also take part to the event next year, which will be about this. And the next session on the social contract will be very important. This year, the forum is particular and dramatic in many ways. So I thank Mario Bezzini and all the colleagues from the Development Center and also from the Inter-American Development Bank for organizing this event. The crisis in Latin America is extremely violent, and it's been almost a year. It's the region that was the hardest struck, and I think not everyone is actually aware of it. And so that's why this forum is very important today, so that in Europe, people really understand how deep the crisis is on the continent, and understand that there's 45 million people who may go back to poverty. Also, the inequalities that were reducing over the past 20 years are now increasing again. 40% of workers do not have any social safety net, and many of them will be losing their job, and there is the threat for the next year of a hunger pandemic, according to the UN. So food security will probably become a very important aspect of our work. So we really need a forum or platform like today, which allows us to say those things, analyze those things, and then take concrete action. And so today, to complement what has been said, I would like to insist on the role of public development banks, the role of the Inter-American Development Bank, which is the leading bank in the region, and the platform of all public banks. There are many public banks in Latin America. There's 76 of them exactly, 21 only in Brazil. So here there's really a public mandate in favor of the reduction of inequalities, and they act differently than commercial banks, and they complement their action. And the banks also really have the possibility to mobilize in a contra-cyclical capacity and to support structural reforms in the region. They've already invested $200 billion, actually every year, and it's probably even more at the moment, because all those banks are going the extra mile at the moment. And so governments and the international community must really support this financial public infrastructure to help with all the big issues of the time. At the AFD, we know those banks because 30% of our financing in Latin America go through those public banks, for example, the CAF, Findeta in Colombia, ICE in Argentina, and I could mention many others. Also banks in federal states in Brazil, for example, the BRDE, the BADESC. And as you know, last month we had an event that where all public banks in the world actually, to which all public banks in the world took part. It was about finance in common, and the Latin American region was very present in all our debates. For example, the CAF or the BNDES took part in our debates. And this will lead to a particular initiative for subnational banks, which mobilize funds in support of sustainable development. And so in the first quarter of 2021, we will launch a platform for dialogue between those banks and cities and development partners so as to better understand their role and also to better mobilize their resources. And I think there's also a debate at the international level on the new resources. And maybe there would be, and also a debate about the new special drawing rights, and this could be the occasion to actually strengthen those organizations. And then to conclude, I would like to say that all the projects that we finance are also like laboratories or evidence of what was very clearly described by the President Alvarado Angel Gurria, is the fact we all actually on this quest for the best public policies, for the best development trajectories that are different from the ones in the past. Those pathways that will allow us to reconcile the protection of population, social cohesion, and the planet and the environment, or the climate and biodiversity. And so this new social contract must be a social contract between nature and humanity, a contract that shows that in all investments we do not reduce the social cohesion and we do not deplete our natural resources. And actually, many Latin American countries are actually committed to this effort and this new definition of public policies. It's the case, for example, in Bolivia and also in Brazil,
renforcer les systèmes de protection
where we are looking at strengthening social protection systems and adapt them to climate change and also to promote employment. We also have a very good project in Colombia, in Barranquilla, where we support the development plan of the city, including its social dimensions or the fight against gender violence, but also supporting the fight against climate issues, for example, the quality of the air or the management of waste. So there's all type of experimentations and projects which are all proofs and evidence to help government, to help them define new public policies and to use private and public investment in quality investment. So this experience is at the disposal of all countries in the region or our colleagues in development banks. And they also are aligned on the reports and analysis of the OECD. And to conclude, I say we need more reforms, we need more public investment, more quality public investment, and that's how a new social contract and a new development model will emerge, maybe in Latin America, and that may then inspire the rest of the world. Thank you.
Muchas
Thank
gracias
you,
a todos por esta
Rémi
Senor.
Rieu.
Thank you very much, Rémi Rieu, and thank you to all the speakers for this opening session, the high-level presidential dialogue on the 12th International Economic Forum on Latin America and the Caribbean. Many things have been said about sustainability and a new development model which is needed in Latin America. As Angel Gurria, the Secretary General of the OECD, has said, the next LEO for 2021 will deal with these issues. It's an outlook which is developed by the OECD, the European Commission, the CAF, and the IDB. Now we give the floor to Mario Pezzini, the OECD Development Center Head and Special Advisor to the Secretary General on Development. He's going to be moderating the next session, dialogue with non-state actors, a new role for them in the aftermath of COVID-19 crisis. Thank you very much, Carol, for your introduction and for managing this opening session, which has been resounding success. We have many friends here with us in this virtual room. I see Manuel Escudero. We have many friends as well. Manuel Escudero is going to give the closest, is going to have the closing remarks. We have Javier Taboada, Carlos Malamud, Silver Galvan from Mexico, Gerardo Bracho, Liana Guerra, many friends who every year are involved in this discussion and on the topic, the given topic for the forum. As has already been said, this forum is special as we are against the background of a pandemic. We have to discuss priorities for public policy in order to foster sustainable recovery and inclusive recovery. And also the private sector needs to open up spaces to involve everybody. The private sector needs to be involved as well as a stakeholder along with the civil society. The impact of the COVID crisis in Latin America needs not be described. There are structural elements regarding development linked to persistent socio-economic gaps, increasing and growing social discontent, which make things more difficult. That's something that has already been highlighted in the current edition of the Latin American Outlook. There's a lack of trust among citizens in governments across the region. So we need to move towards a new model of development, more inclusive and open development. So we need to build a new social contract, as has been underlined in the opening session. We need citizen involvement. Citizens want to be heard. So we have to make the most of this opportunity. We have to reinforce the democratic process. We also need a new productive strategy. The transformation in production needs to be undertaken now. It's something that we cannot put off any longer. Social equality has to be strengthened. The informality is something that has to be tackled because in a society in which a high percentage of people work in the informal economy, the recipes for recovery have to be different from other regions in the world. And a fiscal compact is needed as well. We cannot go back to business as usual. We cannot make the same mistakes as with the financial crisis. We cannot fall back into austerity to recover from this crisis. We need a fiscal compact for better redistribution. We are currently in a world in which the digital transformation is going on, and therefore we may wonder what kind of social contract do we need? And we have to think in terms of political philosophy. We have Rousseau, Locke, many philosophers which are in the origin of the social contract, which is based on legitimacy and the justification of political power and of life in society. And this is no minor matter. It is the social contract which enables us to live in society. The president of Costa Rica told us that citizens will only commit to a new social contract if they perceive that social contract to be fair and equitable. In France, there have been several examples which may prove useful, not to copy them, but maybe as a source of inspiration. We can think of the Grinnell Agreement signed in May 1968, which are historically very significant and which represents a time in which the society was involved in the discussion to redefine a common vision for the society and a different strategy. A social contract, a new social contract for Latin America and the Caribbean calls for strong consensus, a high level of consensus for a new comprehensive, coordinated and consistent development strategy. And the state needs to be involved, of course. Over the last years, there's been some ideological progress, and everything that people discuss was just the private sector. And of course, the private sector needs to play a role, but the private sector cannot do it all. The private sector has to be focused, or is rather focused on the productive sector. So the state has a major role, but not just the state, businesses, and the civil society, NGOs, the academia, international organizations as well. All of them have a role to play in redefining the social contract. I am very happy to have with us Mario Tivoli, which is the Deputy Executive Secretary of the ECLAC. Mario is co-director of working groups on industrial policy for the Initiative of Political Dialogue in the University of Columbia. He's a renowned international expert. There's Maria Baron, lead civil society co-chair, Open Government Partnerships Steering Committee, and Global Executive Director, Directorio Legislativo. Maria is a member of the civil society, and she has worked in many areas related to this topic. Maurizio Bezzeccheri, head of Latin America for Enel. He's held different positions in multinational companies, so he's very familiar with the topic at hand. And also given the business sector in which his company operates, he knows the value of quality infrastructures. And then I have my friend here, Andrea Costafreda. She's a close friend and also the program director for Latin America and the Caribbean, Oxfam. She's always very much involved in any discussion regarding Latin America. Inequalities are something that need to be tackled across the region. So without further ado, we're going to start the discussion. First, I'd like to address which role may non-state actors play in redefining a social contract. And we're going to start with Mario. How can we build this new social contract in the region? Because it is not just about what to do, but about how to do it. So what do you think? Thank you, Mario. It's a pleasure to be with all of you. I'm honored to be here. Before explaining how to do it, we need to contextualize, to frame this issue, because we may think about the social contract as the expression of a common project in the 60s in Europe and in part of Latin America. There was a production model which was more aware of employment, of the need for employment, and there was a global growth rate which was very high. The trade context at the time was rather closed and it was just opening up. So if we think about the social contract with technology on the rise and with a given growth rate is one situation, but the situation is different if those variables change. As a matter of fact, many countries have already redrawn the social contracts, either explicitly or implicitly, in Italy, in France, in Spain, even in the US. There used to be a way of governing that may have been explicit or implicit, and that pertained these processes. Now, the situation is very different now. It may even be a rhetorical question, as we have a very different context. After the 2008 crisis, the middle class was under a lot of pressure. And to think about a social contract to take us out or to recover from the COVID-19 crisis when the whole society is going through hardship is a very different matter. So the most vulnerable parts of the population are the hardest hit. There's a situation of vulnerability, inequality, poverty. So how are we going to go about a new social contract when we don't know what the economic situation is going to be like? We may not be able to ensure employment, financial stability. Things are going to change very rapidly. So to build a social contract in a society which is not the same across the board, which is no longer the society we had years ago, it's a major question and a very difficult question to answer. We have to bear in mind that we're currently in a very uncertain situation, and uncertainty is about the future as well. We don't know what this society is going to be like after the COVID-19 crisis. It's not going to be like what we had in the 70s. It's going to be very different, and therefore we need to factor for that uncertainty in any reflection or discussion about the social contract. As I see it, each community, each production sector need to be faced to a risk-adverse situation in order to embark upon a process which may be seen as an insurance. But it's going to be difficult. Let's think about a company. A company is a very flexible entity. Value chains are going to change. Supply chains are going to change as well. And as Gramsci said, first we need to build an economic culture. And we need a mainstream current of thought. In Latin America, it's been said that we need a culture in which all stakeholders feel represented. And it's not just something that we may discuss at international fora, because it's very nice to talk about this, and that's something we discuss over and over again. But in the end, it is down to politics to land these thoughts into reality. So all sectors need to be engaged through a compact and need to feel represented in any process of rethinking the social contract. And I think that's the most significant issue to bear in mind. We need to involve the state, but a state which thinks differently when confronted to technology and different variables. It's not just about coming up with a social contract which may left behind unemployed people in 20 years' time. So first, we need to acknowledge that there's a high degree of uncertainty, that things change very rapidly, and therefore we need to rethink any idea we may come up with as well. Also, we need a mainstream culture and hegemonic culture, so in which all stakeholders feel represented and which takes into account the most vulnerable and the poorest part of the society. And we need to involve as well the production sector, bearing in mind that SMEs have a different production sector than big companies. So if we do not take all these elements into account, whichever social contract we come up with will be temporary and very fragile. So the social contract, most of the time in the past, were built when the situation was so difficult that people understood that they had to come together in order to overcome those crises. Thank you very much, Mario. It's true that if we apply a historical perspective on social contract, we have different examples. I mentioned the Grenelle agreements, but it's true that you have mentioned different examples. We could think as well about the constitution that was drawn in Italy after the Second World War and the fascist era. At the time, everyone needed to be involved. No one had to be left behind. And that goes for today as well. We need to involve everybody, big, small companies, and we need to acknowledge that the makeup of society is different. We need a political culture which has to bring together different stakeholders to undertake common action. Maria Barón, how can civil society organizations contribute to this effort? I remember my mom, for instance, when there was a problem with public services in the town hall, I said, well, let's go to the town hall to complain. And she said, no, 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 we go to the union or we go to church. So there were strong mechanisms in the past to represent civil society. That may not be the case at the moment. So can the civil society play such a significant role today as well? Thank you. Thank you very much for the introduction to give me the floor. And I must say that your question is very difficult. If I had the answer, I would be the president of the world. We'll support you. I'd like to take 2 steps back and go back to the previous session, which I have found very interesting. Solutions need to be found to tackle problems which are dragging the region even before the pandemic and which have only gone worse because of the pandemic. As for the civil society role, I think that's precisely the role we can play. Which solutions may be available to tackle these issues? I have certain ideas I'd like to put forward, some food for thought. First, something that relates to some work we do within the civil society, and maybe our colleague from Oxfam will agree. In Latin America, the civil society is suffering a difficult situation much more than in previous years. In our organization, we have a sort of a tracker of regulations across the region. Today, in Latin America, there are 70 pieces of legislation which may ultimately pose a threat to civil society in the region. And this is very serious, as we have international compacts, the whole human rights system in the region, democratic systems. which may work, which may be more or less functional, more or less consolidating. That may be a matter for a different discussion. But in any case, it is very serious to see that some pieces of legislation or regulations may hinder the right to freedom of expression, the right to information, the right of assembly, the right of to privacy, and the major components for the civil society to work and operate. So we do have an issue with that. And that's something that we have to take into account if we come up with a new social contract. We have to re-establish those rights for the civil society, maybe counting on the support of international organizations, but we have to uphold the civil society and to have a space for civil society to work before we embark upon the redefinition of a social contract and before we tackle other issues as mentioned in the previous panel.
En el panel anterior, pero digo, deshojándolo un poco, ¿qué es la participación ciudadana, no?
We could detail it and talking about citizen participation. It is less engaged but committed, because we say citizenship participation in the setting up of public policy. And that means that there's a dialogue between peers. I represent the Alliance for the Government of PG, which means that we're working in partnership and in different respects. So, how do you craft political policy in Latin America? And this is a proposal for a possible social contract. You would have to change the way of developing public policy for the solution fund for countries region on a collaborative basis. And it would be co-designing in a way. Third point. In the COVID world, and this was said also in the first part of the meeting, a major effort from all the actors for the recovery, to respond and to make sure that there is a recovery. And a package of recovery measures which have to include the questions we have in civil society. Are governments able to distribute fairly the stimulus packages, make sure that they really reach the people they're directed to, and what is the capacity of transparency of government? And that contains a number of other implications, which is fighting corruption. And this is not the agenda we're discussing. What is our possibility as NGOs to make sure that we get rid of anti-ethical or corruption policies, to make sure that these funds that were raised by all of society are directed to those who need it and to everybody. And the final point, and this is very important, for all of this to be possible and for the civil society to be able to play a role in all of this. And there is a problem in today's world, which is the funding of the civil society organizations. If civil society has to be an effective actor, well, it doesn't have the means today to do it because it has no funding. So it's very hard to fight for a citizen space if the actors don't have a minimum of work guaranteed, and less so if it is what it used to be before the pandemic, which is our ideal, we have to make sure that we have the proper funding. So these are the 4 questions. Fighting for the citizen space that is threatened. How can you develop political public policies with the civil society? How can we make sure that there's transparency in the distribution of the stimulus packages for recovery? And what kind of funding possibilities and support there is for civil society? These are the 4 questions. Thank you very much, Maria. I'm going to ask for your permit, Mauricio, because I would like to give the floor to Andrea, and we will come back to you. Because I was very interested in the suggestions of Maria for the construction of a dialogue and to improve the role of the civil society. In the 70s, the public service was in charge of participation, citizen participation. But something happened over time. And what happened was this idea of the end of history. And therefore, we have to improve each of the public policies. There's no hierarchy because there's no history. There are no bottlenecks. So now we have a new world, and we have improved it on the margins, maybe with this participation. But now we realize that this end of history is a mistake because never has there been more history than now and more bottlenecks. Therefore, we have to realize that there are priorities, and we can not only deal with policy and consider that they're all equal. We also have to identify priorities in the world we're living in, which means, once again, a question of priority. So, Andrea, in your field of work in the social contract, which would you consider are the essential elements in a new social contract? Thank you very much, Mario. It's really a pleasure to share this discussion with colleagues. For Oxfam, what we have been talking about is why we feel that it's important to renew the social contract, and then we'll say which are the terms of this equation. I think that what Latin America is experiencing is a triple crisis, a health crisis that has a disproportionate impact from the demographic point of view, and it probably is due to the lack of investment in health in the past years. And in an Oxfam report, 83 million people were reported as being in a very difficult situation as far as Social Security, especially in Central America and in Venezuela. An economic crisis also, I won't dwell on it because it's also already been sufficiently mentioned. And it could also be leading to a political crisis, which would be the third crisis. And therefore, the claim and the need to rethink the social contract is precisely for this indignation that we could already see before because of an economic stagnation period is going to be tested, and we'll see whether these democracies can do something, because they didn't show that they could even in growth, in times of growth. So how can we consider that this is going to be an opportunity? And in the whats or the whys, or among the different elements, why has it affected more Latin America than other regions in the world? And We have two interpretations. I'd like to stress one of them because the majority still express themselves on the streets. 60%, and most of the women have had to decide either they're going to contract a contagion or they're going to work. So this percentage of people are working in the street. So this is the reality of informality, of precariousness, and a lack of protection. The other element is the fact that, as in America, Latin America, as was said, there is inequality, but even with an unequal growth, there were inequalities, and the growth will be unequal as well. Some will recover very quickly, and others will take 15 years to recover. In one of the reports of Oxfam, we saw that during the worst weeks of the crisis, there were 8 new millionaires or billionaires in the region. And they were the ones who used most of the stimulus package and benefited most of the stimulus packages. And there has to be a better distribution. And we're not talking only about income inequalities or vertical inequalities. There are also horizontal inequalities. If you're part of certain groups, if you're a migrant, if you're a woman, if you're indigenous or from a indigenous origin, obviously your conditions won't be the same. Women in Latin America represent 77% of care. And this is an invisible driver of societies. And they have to combine it with different precarious jobs. And they're the ones who are most unprotected throughout this crisis. And it will be the same in the recovery. So if the question that Maria put to me, how can we make this indignation that's expressed in the street to become an opportunity? We have to consider that there's going to be a collective exit to this crisis. I think we have to guarantee social protection mechanisms, universal social protection. There has been response, but it wasn't sufficient. It has to guarantee rights. We also have to see which were the useful policies to extract millions of people from poverty in the 90s. They won't be the same as the ones we need now. There has to be an intersectionality. We have to protect employment. 70% of employment is given by SME, not the large companies. And the stimulus packages have to benefit those that have the greatest social return. And there is a danger that the stimulus packages reach more easily the large companies that already benefit from tax privileges. And then there's all the area of care. It's a driver of economies, and it rests on the shoulders of women. We need social systems that also take this into consideration. And a couple of more ideas. These are the whats, and now the hows. The social pact, this agenda, these pillars, are not going to be, will have to be funded. Who is going to pay for them? Since the debt is increasing and there's less income, a recovery, an unequal recovery, means that we need exceptional measures because wealth is undertaxed In Argentina, efforts are being made. There's a solidarity effort. In Bolivia, it's also being discussed. Digital taxes that would be taxing the largest companies. So we need a tax pact, and this is urgent. And the second idea is that we have the political agency, and I agree with Maria. Social mobilization that was experienced by the region before the crisis and that is still present now is an opportunity for a social pact. We shouldn't fear it. What we have to do is consider that it's part of the contract. Indignation is very important for recovery. And after the protest of 2019, there have been more. And we see that the actors are different. We see that the young people are mobilizing and they didn't live under dictatorship and they have less fear and they demand more and they're able to they're able to achieve a constitutional reform in Chile. We have to include these voices. And we have to include them in the pact, in the contract, this social contract. And as Maria was saying, and I agree, we have to protect the citizens and the democratic space. If we continue to stigmatize protests and the restrictions of, there are restrictions of freedom of expression. According to the recent surveys, the situations are worsening. If we can revitalize the social policy and give them more expression, we will be able to avoid reducing the democratic space. And finally, we can't leave countries, societies, the new actors that are claiming for space. We can't leave them alone. The international community need more participation. We need a multilateralism, and a responsible one that allows to reduce the debt and increases liquidity to give more fiscal space to governments and creates more incentives. There's development cooperation. For many, this is going to be essential. We don't understand. We have to make sure that there's a recovery of the political dialogue between countries, and the focus has to be the need to recover the social contract. There's a strategic relationship between Latin America and European Union. It shouldn't only be a green partnership or a social partnership, but a partnership to recover the social contract. Thank you very much. I think now you've talked about different actors, and I think it's time to talk with the private sector. With Mauricio Bezzeccheri, we have a good opportunity here because the private sector that he's in charge of is a private sector that works a lot with local communities. So he has a lot of experience in this field. Mauricio, how can the private sector contribute to the involvement and participation for a new social pact?
Por deformazione, primero cuando se habla de contrato, se habla de pacto.
Cuando se habla de contrato, so when we speak about a social contract, we need to speak about the parties. So we need to define who does what. Therefore, we need to clearly define roles. It would make no sense to have a company playing the role of the state or the other way around. Secondly, everything we've heard so far shows us that we are not alone in the world. In Latin America, people are going through the same situations as in in other countries in the world, with specificities in terms of security, gender balance, and with specific features in Latin America. Indigenous people and the relations as well among Latin American and European countries. But the Gini coefficient, for instance, if we compare the Gini coefficient in Latin America and in the US, we see there's no that much difference. So what we're going through is a situation in which thanks to the availability of social networks, everyone can compare with someone else. So we share the same context. In Peru, 71% of the labor force is in the informal economy. And that's another element that we have to take into account, and that is widespread across America, Latin America. Latin America has lots of commodities. There's wide availability of commodities across the region. And I don't want to quote Galeano and everything that commodities imply for the continent, but widespread commodities is a source of wealth for Latin America, which has not yielded a manufacturing industry in the region. There's a network of small and medium enterprises, which is a part of the chain that has not been fully developed. If we want a new contract, not only do we need to study the context, but also the drivers. Currently, changes are taking place at a faster speed. And the pandemic has made the situation worse. But in reality, what the pandemic has done is to lay bare positive and negative aspects that were there beforehand, and the pandemic has only sped up the processes. So stark contradictions are more visible now because of the pandemic. What can a private company do in terms of complying with their part of the social contract? Enel, which is the company I work for, what can Enel do? We provide an enabler, as energy is a driver. It enables different activities, industrial activities, different activities in the employment sector. So our duty is to enable the highest number of people to perform these activities so that they can improve their quality of life. In Latin America, around 4% of people have no access to energy. And there are 2% of people which has limited access to energy. We're talking about 20 or 30 million people across the region which are in such a situation. So a power company as Enel, which has recently launched a $1 billion investment in renewable energy in Brazil, and which has around 5 billion of planned investments in Latin America over the next 5 years. A company like this, like ours, like Enel, takes on their responsibility, which is to invest. And to invest means to create a possibility of distributing, because if we don't create, we can't distribute. And that goes for energy, and that goes for wealth as well. So we need to lay down the foundations and create the conditions that favor wealth creation and distribution. But how to do so? We opted for fostering energy transition along with a social and political transition, which are also needed, as Andrea pointed out. And to do so, we need to spot the main drivers. Regarding the energy transformation, we noticed that we need to bet on decarbonization, not only to fight climate change. As Maria said, 80% of the Latin America population lives in big cities, whereas the average worldwide is around 50 plus. So in Latin America, we have a huge concentration of people in cities. Therefore, there are different communities. We have an urban community. We distribute and provide energy in Santiago, in Lima, in Buenos Aires, in Sao Paulo, in Rio de Janeiro, in Bogota. We know very well how cities in the region work. So cities are a major player in the cities. 80% of the Latin America population live in cities. But there are companies and families which are not based in big cities. And then you have a huge amount of land, which is twice as big as Italy, and in which population is always lower. So at Enel, we decided to build capacity and entrepreneurship skills within communities. This means that communities are not just entitled to subsidies. We want communities to be drivers of their own changes and to be enablers of their own activity. And there is another issue which for us is very significant, that of circularity. In the current pandemic, which is hitting the whole world, the circular economy becomes a major driver because we see a reallocation of generated resources. So we create resources and we use them better. A further issue has to do with digitalization. Why is this significant? Because the risk is to have a wide digital divide, to make that gap wider, and to have more inequalities in the K-curve that Andrea was discussing. There's always a risk, of course, but we need to focus on issues to raise the alarm when risks arise. And changes will be speedier if we are more flexible. Finally, we have to remember Bauman's lesson. We live in a rigid society. Therefore, a perspective to project ourselves into the future is non-existent. Within the company, we talk about an agile structure. To create a structure, you have to embark upon a process of trial and error. And bearing in mind that if you change the context, the structure needs changing as well. So you need to be flexible enough to face those changes. And that's the perspective of the private sector I wanted to share with you. Thank you. We can't hear you, Mario. You're muted. Well, all the better for you if I'm muted, says Mario. So now we've heard different speakers. Each of them have made a very significant contribution. Of course, we need to define the context, the framework where we're going to redefine the social contract. Next, we have to define stakeholders and which role stakeholders need to play. In any case, the social contract is currently broken. In many cases, there are even constitutional crises. So we need to rebuild that social contract with wide participation, wide engagement, and also thinking about a broad design based of a story based of a perspective which is enticing. So we need to think about which vision, which strategy we want for society. We need to think about the narrative, how we're going to come up with this national vision, how we're going to involve everyone in the country. This morning, I talked to a minister in Togo. Colombia has come out with experimental plans as well. Togo has launched experimental initiatives as well. Gloria Alonso knows what I'm talking about. In any case, there are different experiences which we may become familiar with to clearly state which elements we need to take into account for this new social contract. Regional integration is important for some actors, and we may need a more regional than national perspective. Others, in turn, point to non-productive stakeholders, useless, so to speak, men and women. Of course, that's not my point of view, but men and women which may be perceived as useless and marginalized by a sector of society. And that's a very relevant question. I'm sure that we'll discuss that sometime in the future. But we're lagging behind, we're behind schedule. So we're going to move on to the closing session on which type of international cooperation we need to support these engagement and inclusive processes to build a new social contract. There's long-standing cooperation which was built around other issues such as fighting extreme poverty. So we do need a different kind of cooperation in the current context. Which stakeholders need to be involved to move towards a new multilateralism? Furthermore, the COVID-19 crisis has shown, as we saw yesterday, at the 60th anniversary celebrations, the COVID-19, as I said, shows that we need new consensus beyond the Washington consensus. We need a new model for cooperation. We need a new deal. So without further ado, I'm going to give the floor to Martin Seschel, who is the Deputy Director General for International Cooperation at the European Commission, known as DEFCO. We have Mr. Ferrero, Director General for Policies on Sustainable Development, and then we have the moderator, Benigno López Benítez. Thank you very much, and you have the floor, Benigno. Thank you, Mario. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. And thank you for taking part in this. Thank you to the speakers for taking part in this session, which is going to revolve on cooperation in order to tackle the short and mid-term consequences of the COVID-19 crisis. We are facing unprecedented and significant challenges, and we need to develop strategies to overcome the pandemic and to get back stronger with a better social and economic environment. Before giving the floor to the panelists, I'd like to quote some words of Mauricio Clave. He said that partnerships are still key, all the more so in a situation of crisis, because in addition to pre-existing challenges, we have the impacts of the COVID-19, as well as migration crisis, the climate issue, and so on and so forth. we have reached agreements with social partners such as Spain, France, or the European Commission in the region to implement some initiatives. With Spain, given the current crisis among Venezuelan migrants because of the pandemic, there's an initiative to meet the needs of those people and to respond to the health crisis caused by COVID-19. Investments are being made on sanitation and water resources as well, for instance, in Paraguay. And there are funds provided by the European Union. With the French Development Agency, a loan has recently been approved with $480 million for the Dominican Republic in order to strengthen their response to COVID-19, to enhance public policy, and to strengthen the health and economic sectors. With the European Commission, there are some lending operations which have gathered 40 million in donation to channel resources and technical assistance for projects which tackle the COVID crisis and which strengthened health primary health systems. Also to promote energy resilience and other measures to improve competitiveness and productivity in the Caribbean and in Central America. Furthermore, we're negotiating the leverage of over $250 in loans from the IDB in Colombia and Peru, with additional resources from the European Union to help, for instance, Venezuelan migrants to face these COVID-19 challenges. So those are just several examples of cooperation, international cooperation, which should be replicated across the region in Latin America and the Caribbean. And without further ado, Martin Seychelles has the floor. He's the Director General for International Cooperation and Development at the European Commission. Martin, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, a good day to you, wherever you may be. And a special thanks to our hosts and organizers for providing us with this timely opportunity to identify some key issues, but also to reflect on what could give new impetus and what the EU could offer in shaping cooperation with Latin America and the Caribbean. The distinguished panelists who spoke before us have provided us with a number of inspiring thoughts, and we now have the difficult task to conclude and reflect on the way forward. But overall, it has become clear that we are facing an unprecedented crisis to which we cannot respond with the same old mindset. To act with the future in mind, our renewed partnership with Latin America and the Caribbean is indispensable, and I would say is more relevant than ever. In fact, the title chosen for this closing session could not better reflect our vision. The cooperation between the EU and Latin America and the Caribbean has greatly influenced our thinking as to what cooperation stands for in the 21st century and what is the true meaning of partnerships. And it has also been at the heart of some of the most significant achievements on the multilateral agendas of the last decade. I can just mention as examples, without our shared cooperation, the Agenda 2030 and the Paris Climate Agreement would not have happened. Just one example. But today again, as we confront the greatest global shock of our generation, we should strive with all of our partner countries for a multilateralism that works for people. Over the past few decades of cooperation, Europe and Latin America have built a solid partnership based on shared interests and values with high ambition and solidarity. And it is very much in step with the needs of our times and leads us to innovate and create. First of all, we all recognize that there is no single path to development. And it is also clear that economic growth alone is not enough for long-term sustainable development. We need to redouble our efforts to build a strong social contract and trust between citizens and their institutions. This is as important as ever. We face triple crisis: health, economic, and social, while our regions continue to fight the virus and recover from months of lockdown. COVID-19 has revealed the strengths and weaknesses of our societies and has also exposed and exacerbated existing structural trends. it has laid bare inequalities and threatened social contracts. As has already been mentioned, vulnerable groups, among them women, youth, informal workers, migrants, indigenous peoples, are particularly at risk. So with all this in mind, the EU-LAC development partnership is more relevant and necessary than ever. And as our societies pursue the recovery as they must, we should not ignore the negative effects of increasing inequalities and keep a strong focus on that in all actions of our cooperation. In fact, social cohesion has been one of the distinguishing marks of the European project. It is part of our DNA, a fundamental part of our DNA. And even in difficult times, Europe remains internationally recognized for its strong social structures, which have also helped us enormously. So the commitment to maintain social cohesion is at the core of our policies when it comes to the three pillars of the European integration, namely economic growth, institutional stability, and social protection. European societies are united in their belief that public authorities have a responsibility to create necessary conditions for equal opportunities, social inclusion, and well-being of citizens. The private sector and international financial institutions have an important role to play, notably to offer decent employment opportunities and to target investments with the greatest social benefits. We want to work with Latin America and with the Caribbean to ensure that international funding efficiently serves the needs and realities of the countries in the region as they are facing a specific set of structural challenges and needs, whether it is investment in sustainable infrastructure or boosting the contribution of SMEs to the formal economy, or simply offering the institutional knowledge and experience in addressing social cohesion. Together, we can tackle inequalities, push for greater cohesion, enhance regional integration, and consolidate more sustainable paths for development. So Europe is and will remain the most significant development partner for Latin America and the Caribbean in the coming years. And the pandemic has shown just how strong our commitment is. The EU and its member states, working as Team Europe, are taking swift, coordinated action to help our partners across the world recover from the shock. This includes Latin America and the Caribbean, where the EU is committing over 2.4 billion euros. The EU member states have followed a variety of social cohesion models, with the potential, therefore, to offer a range of approaches that could serve as inspiration to Latin America and Caribbean countries who in turn have heterogeneous aspirations. Our flagship program in the area of social cohesion and equality, Eurosocial, is currently covering 19 countries of Latin America and the Caribbean, and it approaches inequalities in their multidimensional character, including the main angles of social policies, good governance, and gender equality. And it has evolved over the years in its response to the changing needs of the region, focusing on the transfer of expertise and experiences in response to countries' needs. Through this program, the EU stands by our partner countries and supports them in the strengthening of the social compact in these challenging times. Among the recent examples are the support to the constitutional process in Chile and to the creation of the Economic and Social Council in Costa Rica. Now, as we approach the end of a year where we had to deal with an extraordinary set of circumstances, it is natural to look ahead, and we all want to see a better future, where we are able to learn, overcome, and turn the recovery from the crisis into a better world with better outcomes for all. So let us take this chance, collectively, to redefine our patterns of growth and development and our structures of international cooperation. The European Union will strive for a reconstruction which preserves the environment and which makes the best of the new technologies while maintaining a strong commitment to social inclusion and justice. The green transition must be fair and inclusive, and we must overcome the digital gap. We envisage a recovery scenario in which the environmental, technological, productive, and social agendas are fully articulated and acting in synergy. However, it is clear we cannot and we will not achieve this alone. Our success will rely on the dialogue and strong partnerships worldwide, and more specifically with Latin America and the Caribbean. And to a large degree, it will also depend on our joint ability to deliver innovative solutions and to be courageous and committed. By way of example, during the first months of 2021, we will be launching a new platform, Adelante 2, for sharing expertise and offering solutions, a demand-driven rapid response mechanism that will enable us to carry out triangular cooperation initiatives. We want to mobilize targeted, flexible, and tailor-made support to Latin America and the Caribbean countries to move forward in the achievement of the SDGs. And we are ready to look for shared EU LAC solutions to overcoming the challenges that the pandemic will doubtlessly leave. Through innovation and flexibility, we very much believe that together we have the potential to drive positive change and be a force for effective international cooperation. So, ladies and gentlemen, yes, we are living through extraordinary times. This year has not been easy for any of us, but by working together and remaining committed to a renewed partnership between the EU and Latin America and the Caribbean, we are confident we can pull through and that our regions will come back better and our partnership will come out stronger. We look forward certainly to working with all of you to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin, for your words and your vision. Now I will turn the floor to Mr. Gabriel Ferrero, Director General de Políticas del Ministerio de Asuntos Exteriores, Unión Europea y Cooperación.
Director General of Policy in the European Union. Gabriel, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Benigno. First of all, I would like to thank the Center of Development of OECD, Mario, Ambassador, Escudero, President, for having invited me to take part in this last event. I would also like to congratulate the Center for its celebrating its 12th Forum on Latin America and Caribbean that has a special importance for Spain because of the role we play in the OECD. We've asked to rethink a very important issue. I think, and especially focus in the perspective of the pandemic, which is rethinking the social contract, concluding a day, such a day with such a high level participation has the disadvantage of the fact that there's little for me to add to what I heard as a consensus that emerges from the participants. And as a conclusion, I would allude to some of these arguments, which is the nature of the crisis that we're experiencing, the vision that we share to exit this crisis, and the agenda of recovery. The recovery has to be rebuilding differently, and this is an opportunity that is offered to us by the crisis. Clearly, we agree that this is not just another crisis. It's not only a health crisis. And why do we have the sense that there's an opportunity here? I think that we're experiencing a crisis that is, for the first time, systemic. It's affecting all countries, all continents, exactly at the same time, simultaneously. This is revealing all the deficiencies which are also systemic, which relates to the national levels of development as globally. The health crisis is definitely a health crisis, but it's the first time where we've extended the limits of the planet. We have agro-food production systems that are no longer viable. It's a crisis that is a tragic metaphor of what the climate change can represent, concentrated in a few months instead of being over several decades. But it's also a social crisis, as we've seen today, and an economic crisis that reveals the effects of inequality, of the different working conditions that ending working conditions, the lack of social protection or of public health services that guarantee universal coverage, and this is due to a reduction in expenditure and a backsliding of health investment. And it happens at a time where the narratives of the populous countries are claiming protectionist measures, and it only It means that only if we do it in cooperation can we find a solution to this type of crisis, these types of crises. And given the situation, it is urgent to reconstruct the social contract at all levels, national, regional, and global, as we have mentioned in the whole during the first session. Secondly, I think that there's a very good piece of news. There's also very good news, which is the response and the future vision. We already have it. We've worked a lot to discuss it, to agree on it, and we just have to have a shared vision now. As we know, this renewed social contract, intergenerational, between generations, it's one of the characteristics of this contract. It's very important to reach the objectives of the Paris Agreement and the SDGs. And President Sanchez mentioned it at the General Assembly last year, the General Assembly of the United Nations. And it's important to remind us of this, as we said by the earlier speaker. It's possible through an alliance between Latin America and European countries, many of which are members of the OECD. We have to have a universal vision, and the political context that we're experiencing and that will be consolidated will be a good opportunity to renew this partnership. This partnership that will allow cooperation between Latin America and the European Union and other European countries. A challenge, but also an opportunity. We all agree on this. We have to seize the opportunity of this crisis to manage the necessary transformations and reach the SDGs and to meet our commitments on climate. It's also a shared vision that allows us to share an agenda and priorities that will have to guide this new and renewed cooperation, which will have a different nature, as some of the people who spoke before mentioned. And these are priorities that we know these are transformations that have to do with the environmental transition both in urban and rural areas, and with digitalization. And it has to do with redistribution and a green taxation system, both nationally and globally. It has to do also with public policy. And it has to do with protection of employment and minimum income, which is something essential to in this time of the pandemic.
Como se ha mencionado, nos hemos referido mucho a los sistemas públicos de salud.
As we said, we've referred to the public systems of health and education, and they have to be part of the social contract. And not only adopt an economic approach, it has to do with research and knowledge, and also the emergence of local and territorial spaces, which are key to localized political policy and participation, and that will be used for reaching the SDGs. We will have to work with SMEs, large companies, and we will have to change, as was said by the moderator. We'll have to find business models that allow for these transformations and give more social value and environmental.
La recuperación de los espacios institucionales de participación
and it has to do with recovering citizen engagement spaces, as has been said in the previous session, and a new space for cooperation among state actors, companies, universities, academia, local communities, applying a multilateral approach to engage everyone in order to renew the social contract. And as Andrea said earlier, that means that the civil society has to be involved and that spaces for civic engagement have to be safeguarded, which, as has been said, are under threat in certain countries. In Spain, we have a plan for recovery, resilience, and transformation to overcome the COVID-19 crisis, in which we have spelled out our priorities within the European Union. So we are completely in line with the shared vision that we have with Latin America and the Caribbean, with the Paris Agreement, and just to join forces to undertake transformations in order to tackle challenges we're facing. We have to seize opportunities through different transitions so that the transition processes are drivers of social and economic progress. Those are some of the axes which can redefine international cooperation in the region, strengthening a strategic partnership within the global context and taking into account transformation processes, in particular, environmental transformation processes in business, in public policy, in social and civic engagement, in knowledge creation, and also in fiscal policies and tax policies. Those were also some of the elements touched upon in the ministerial meeting held yesterday at EU level with ministers from Latin America and the Caribbean. They discussed issues associated with these priorities, first and foremost, the COVID-19 crisis, but also the need to join forces for a green agenda to undertake transformation, fair and equitable transformation processes, and to move towards a digital economy, minimizing negative impacts. In the ministerial meeting held yesterday, there were some spaces for cooperation pointed out. So we have a program of work, an agenda for political dialogue, and a reinforcement of our strategic cooperation between the EU and Latin America and the Caribbean. In Spain, we believe that we should have we should use this moment as a stepping stone towards a better future. Furthermore, without a role for the state, without the public sector, without public policies, it is not possible to overcome the crisis and to create resilience. Decades of policies which have undermined the public sector have led to less resilience to face the current circumstances. Also, we cannot go back to business as usual after this crisis. We have to undertake sound reforms, deep reforms through economic policies, which call for a higher level of consensus across a region in which governance faces many challenges. And in this particular area, international cooperation through a strategic partnership can come in handy. As for multilateralism in the region, we are at a time in which some pundits discuss or explain that there are political crises which undermine the role of a regional international organization in Latin America, and we cannot allow that, as international organizations are key at the moment to overcome this crisis. So we need for international organizations to be functional, and we need political will to strengthen multilateralism. Finally, I could mention some examples, recent examples, of how we can combine present and future needs to design smart policies. Over the past few months, during the pandemic crisis, we have seen that horizontal cooperation is key, based on shared priorities with Latin America and the Caribbean. There have been horizontal dialogues on COVID-19. Experts from Spain and from Latin American partners joined forces and met so that we could share information and lessons we had learned in very difficult times, as we were one of the countries which was hit the first and the hardest at the beginning of the pandemic. So we shared information. We also shared information and we pushed for development in the UN. There are joint proposals and work with Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General, to push for transformational decisions. The FACE Fund was mentioned earlier. President Sanchez has put forward international global platforms to push for the transformation agenda. Another example is the joint initiative for a common response for Latin America and the Caribbean regarding the COVID-19 crisis. That's an initiative put forward by the Spanish government along with several Latin American partners in order to work with international financial institutions to ensure access to international financing for these countries. In the extraordinary conference of foreign affairs ministers in the within the Ibero-American Summit, that's an issue that was discussed, and I'm sure that in the next summit that will be held in Andorra, it's a topic that will be addressed again. To sum up, we share a common vision in terms of the environment around the Paris Agreement, and that shared vision can enable Latin American countries to move forward with the help of OECD countries and EU countries as well. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share some thoughts with you. Thank you very much, Gabriel, and thank you to all guest speakers for their contributions. Thank you as well to the organizers for giving us the opportunity to listen to them. It is clear that multilateralism needs to be based on a significant transformational agenda, always having the 2030 agenda as the vision to pursue. It's reassuring to see that Latin American countries and Caribbean countries are not alone in their efforts to fight this crisis. This is a crisis that has affected everyone across the world, and we join forces to overcome the crisis together. Now we're going to give the floor to Manuel Escudero, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Spain to the OECD, who is going to give the closing remarks. Mr. Escudero, you have the floor. Thank you very much, and good afternoon to you all. Okay, I could not switch on my camera. Thank you very much. It is a pleasure to share with you these final words in the forum as Spanish ambassador to the OECD and as permanent representative of Spain to the OECD and chair of the governing board of the OECD Development Center. This issue of rethinking the social contract in COVID times is highly relevant. First, I'd like to thank the OECD Development Center, the IDB, and the AFD for organizing this forum one more year and for giving us the opportunity to discuss and reflect together on issues and opportunities across the region in these difficult and exceptional times. Many speakers have taken part, high-level speakers have taken part in the forum to reflect upon a new social contract in Latin America and about how to respond to the needs of citizens across the region, what's the role of non-state actors, and how we can strengthen international cooperation. For the opening session, we heard the President of the Republic of Costa Rica, His Excellency Carlos Alvarado Quesada, and we had also the opportunity to listen to the highest authorities at the OECD, the Secretary General, and also the IDB, Mauricio Kleber, and the AFD, Mr. Rémy Riou. I think that discussion set out the priorities in terms of policies for an inclusive, consistent recovery, and it pointed a way for countries to work together. Today, more than ever, we need policies which are inclusive, which create competitiveness and foster sustainable development. To count on the support of international organizations such as the OECD, multilateral banks such as the ADB, and cooperation agencies such as the AFD, as well as to count on the leadership of the EU is key in this endeavor. To that end, we also need to involve non-state actors so that they play a key role in redefining the social contract, as was explained in the second session. ECLAC was represented by the Deputy Secretary, Executive Secretary, which has given us a regional perspective, Maria Barón, representing the Partnership for Open Government and Directorio Legislativo, as well as Andrea Costafreda from Oxfam, have given us the approach of the civil society. Finally, Maurizio Bezzegheri has shared with us the perspective of the private sector and particularly of Enel. Those contributions are very significant. They're food for thought that we can take into account when designing transformative policies. Also, we need to take into account the international dimension. Nowadays, challenges are global, increasingly global, and therefore that calls for a new multilateralism. We need to rethink international and multilateral cooperation as discussed in the last session in the forum. We need a new social contract which tapped into opportunities and challenges associated, and to fight challenges associated with climate change and other major issues that affect the whole world. Martin Sechel has explained what the European Commission is doing, and we had the opportunity to listen to my friend, Mr. Ferrero, who is the head for sustainable development policies in the Spanish government. Both have shown how important it is to have regional international partnerships and always keeping an eye on the global agenda. Ladies and gentlemen, the key takeaway of today's forum is that the current circumstances open up an opportunity for rethinking the social contract, for rethinking public policy, and to foster more sustainable development. A social contract has to be based on key pillars: a sustainable production strategy, stronger welfare systems, and stable public finances, inclusive finances as well. The crisis offers valuable lessons in this regard, and we have to take good note so that we can come up with a sound and fair strategy, recovery strategy. Redefine social contract calls for a high level of consensus among citizens. We need a coordinated, consistent, and comprehensive development strategy involving all stakeholders and in which all voices are heard to promote productivity, inclusiveness, and formal employment, as well as respect for the environment. The impact of the pandemic has stretched our systems, institutional and societal systems, and challenges and issues have been laid bare by the pandemic even more. it is clear that today, more than ever, in Latin America and the Caribbean, we need to rethink this social contract. That means an implicit agreement of different communities and organizations in a given country and for a given society. Without a social contract, a country cannot be integrated and cannot put in place redistributive policies for the benefit of all citizens. Without a social contract, there's no welfare programs, there's no sufficient public resources, because then it will be the survival of the fittest in the market without regulation by the state, without mediation by the state. So given the lack of public resources in many countries, the welfare system was very weak. And that's been shown by the pandemic, and that's something to be redressed in the future. In countries in which there's no welfare system or employment benefits, support has been insufficient for many citizens, which means that millions of people had to make a choice between dying from COVID or dying from starvation, as Andrea pointed out. That's something that has become clear in many Latin American countries, even in OECD member countries. Furthermore, in developed countries, where decisions on public goods such as health, there's a new dimension to be considered for the social contract. All countries need to reflect upon the constraints laid bare by and limitations laid bare by the pandemic in terms of welfare systems, social protection, and public resources. That is, in terms of the social contract. Of course, there are uncertainties, as Mario explained, but the lack of resilience faced to the current crisis is a certainty which we cannot ignore. And that is why we need to rethink the social contract in this context. The New Deal for Development, as we are discussing in the Development Center. And that does not mean that the social contract is broken in Latin America, as Mario explained. Maybe, if I may, there has never been a sound social contract in many countries in the region. So it's not a question of rebuilding the social contract, but a question of building, of creating the social contract, and do so fairly, with a demand for public services, thinking of the ecological transition as well to save the planet. That is why today's discussions are just a first step towards exploring how to approach progress in the region. I'd like to conclude just stressing that many challenges we're facing, including the pandemic, are global challenges, and therefore we need to strengthen international and, above all, regional dialogues. Today's dialogue is the example of policy dialogue that has to be widespread across Latin America, using all platforms available. Renewed regional cooperation is needed, exploring regional opportunities, as mentioned by Angel Gurria. It is key to join forces through better dialogue and cooperation to enable a better recovery as well for the benefit of Latin American and Caribbean people. The next Latin American outlook for 2021, created by the OECD, ECLAC, CAF, and the European Union, will focus on how to move towards a new model of development, enabling inclusive and sustainable recovery. So all the ideas put forward in today's forum will feed that document to come up with better ideas to overcome the current circumstances. Thank you very much for your participation. I hope that we'll be able to see each other face to face in 2021, as this is a very special forum, and we want to see our friends from Latin America and the Caribbean, and also to celebrate the decision to create the Development Center at the OECD. And that's all. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much.
And
for the opportunity
thank you very much for giving us
to
the opportunity
discuss.
to learn from each other.